The game brings you distinguished personalities, leaders, achievers, captains of industry, innovators, masterful storytellers, creatives, and entertainers, all hosted by a master of the game.
His Royal Blackness, KKD,
the finest.
Catch Master of the Game on CTV. Oh yes, nuggets of inspiration and delightful treats for your enjoyment. Whether you love power, money, beauty, or fame, there is so much to learn from Master of the Game. Only in the place to be. The coolest channel, CTV. Hello and welcome to Master of the Game, the program on which we bring you the movers, shakers, icons, and legends of our beloved motherland Ghana. My name is Darwah, Kwasi Kyei Darwah, and I'm delighted to be united with you. Wherever you are in the world, know that we're streaming live on Facebook at MyCTVGH and also on Accra 100.5 FM. We're piping hot. Also on Class 91.3 FM, and we're also streaming on YouTube at MyCTVGH. My special guest today is one of a kind. Describes his career as fulfilling, exciting, and often challenging. He's been an economic advisor to 5 African presidents. He has served as the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry in his beloved motherland Ghana that he has yearned to come back to in all his years working abroad for international corporations. And he is a former Vice President for Coca-Cola Africa and the Middle East. There is so much to say about him by way of career, but let me introduce you to the man, the legend, Robert Ahomka-Lindsay.
Pleasure to be here, Kwasi.
What do I call you, Chief?
Robert is fine. Robert is fine. Good to see you.
My former Chief Executive Officer at Ghana Investment Promotions Center, where I worked as Director of Public Affairs and Communications to you. I'm very happy to have served you because there was so much I got to learn.
Appreciate it.
You were very strict, very orderly, very structured, and I think it's benefited me in so many ways too.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us at that time. We needed it. It was important.
Interesting. Two Londoners come back to Africa to work in the same place.
It was meant to be, clearly.
So, let me start with your role in Ghana as the Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry. Who did you serve under?
Alan Tremanting, who I've known for over 30 odd years.
And in whose government?
In President Akufo-Addo.
In President Akufo-Addo's government.
Yes. So,
well, and previously served
prior to that at President Akufo's government as the CEO of GIPC.
Why is it that you only serve in MPP governments? Aren't you Ghanaian? Can't you serve in every other government?
It's a good question. I think it's more my leaning, my economic leaning. I'm a right of center. As I said to my father, who was a fervent socialist, socialism doesn't work. So I'm a market economy sort of person. So, but the question is a valid one.
Why do you say socialism doesn't work?
Well, if I look at the countries which in the days of the 1950s and 60s were socialist, today they're even more capitalist than the capitalist country.
But even the capitalists have some elements of socialism.
Oh, without a doubt.
Because the NHS, for instance, in England.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the areas that people often make a great mistake. They assume that capitalism doesn't understand that there are losers, potential losers, and those that can fall by the wayside. That's why if you look at Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, you look at basic economic policies,
for every economist.
It always tells you 2 other things you must do when you run a market economy. You must have 1, strong regulation. This is to ensure that people's behavior, when I say people, I'm talking about the players within the system, meet the law's requirement, and also you have mechanisms to catch people who may not benefit as a result of that. NHIS, the essence of having a system for those who are not doing well, or who have not done well. And I think sometimes we forget that part is not focused on enough. So all people see is the negative, or they see people doing very well. And often when that happens is because either regulation is gone or the safety nets have been missed.
But isn't the bigger challenge in Africa the fact that the regulators are usually also players, and they form regulation that actually serves their parochial interests?
This, as a system, is bound to failure. You must have an independent regulator who is an independent arbiter of issues. The minute the regulator loses that independence, the ability to act in the interest of the public good, most people, you've lost the essence of a market economy. Because then the excesses come, and then people start questioning it. And then even the benefits of a market economy gets drawn away or gets filtered away because the regulation goes. And what we have found often in Africa is a couple of things. One, we go too fast for a market-based economy, completely open, or
too open
too
for our
open.
own good.
Yes, sometimes we do that. We tend to jump very, very fast to follow the rule book, when sometimes those we are working with are not following the rule book that closely. So we need to be a little smarter about evolvement. That's why it's called development. You don't start A and go to B, C, D. You look at most countries, it takes them 30, 40, 50 years. You don't go overnight. And I think this is somewhere sometimes we've lost the way. And so when it comes to regulation, we must make sure that as we open up markets, the regulator must be as strong as the opening of the market. Otherwise, you will fail to get the benefit of a market economy.
When the regulator bends to the will of the one who pays the piper, what then happens to the economy?
Well, you end up with a number of scenarios. Either, if one who plays the piper is benevolent, i.e. Lee Kuan Yew, 1950, 60, 70, you can end up with a regulator that does things who might be in the public good. But if the person is not benevolent in how they look at what is happening, the regulator becomes an impediment to the public good. And therefore, the benefits of a market economy only benefits a few, while the majority lose out. Hence, people start questioning, is market economy the way to go?
Well, people will question that when the few actually are found out to be close allies, friends and family of the regulator or the powers that be.
Yeah. And I think that is an area we have to accept and deal with head on. We can't play around the bush on that.
How shall we deal with that?
I think it's I actually believe it's part of our development, part of our evolution as people. And I think that one of the things we need to learn to do more and more is question. Our Ghanaian basic cultural values doesn't question. We tend to, in a right way, have a sort of reverence to the older person. Respect. Those things are positive to the extent that those things don't go beyond a certain area.
Respect for age is not a problem, but not all the elders have proven to be wise.
Without a shadow of a doubt. That's without the shadow of a doubt. So I think part of what we have to try and evolve into is how we question respectively. Call it constructive criticism. Without either those that are criticizing being labeled enemies of whatever, and those who are receiving the criticism feeling that they have been attacked on a personal level. The minute you're in public service, even in a corporate service, you must realize that you're working for something else. If you want to work for yourself, set up your own company and do your own thing. But the minute you accept that role, you must understand that those days you do things a certain way must come to an end. And if they don't, I'm a great believer in karma. What goes around comes around. You may make it today like if hay is coming down tomorrow morning. But I can assure you, within a very short period of time, reality will set in. They say, remember those you meet as you go up, because you see those same people as you come down. And that is the reality.
And that line brings me to the culture your mother is from, the Ashanti heritage,
Yes.
where we say in our capital, Sikandi ubidi wawedaji.
And you know that it is something that I have understood more and more as I've got older. The importance of your heritage. You know, my mother is a direct descendant through her mother of Chinubu Akodua's sister.
Oh.
So that means, and it's a fact, I can sit on the Kumawu stool, even though people look at me, fancy natural music, there's Fanti all over me. My father is a Fanti.
Dad. But you know, Ashanti is matrilineal heritage.
Very much so.
That's it.
So, and when I read about what Chinubu Akodua did as part of the establishment of the Ashanti nation, you can't but feel that, look, I've done nothing.
You've done a lot.
Oh, you know, but you feel that I can do more, or I should be doing more, because the heritage, what you've inherited, the name, what is in your blood, means that the expectation, for me anyway, is a lot more. You cannot rest on your laurels. You must keep going. And so that for me is one of the most important areas when I look at the Ashanti tradition, how the Ashantis came to be, the history of Ashantis, the 1700s, what we were doing, evolution through Prempeh first being sent to. I even went to Seychelles to go and see where Prempeh lived, to see exactly where he was. You get to understand that you come from a rich heritage. This is not to say anybody else's heritage is less, but I am who I am. I can't change that.
Of course.
So it makes you realize that you have something to offer, especially when you've been brought up in an environment where all you hear about is Shakespeare. All you hear,
Geoffrey Chaucer.
All you
Milton
hear about
Friedman.
is Churchill, Milton Friedman, and you begin to wonder, so where are the black people in this story?
Where is my heritage?
How do I fit in this picture? If you don't find yourself fitting in, you actually begin to question yourself, or you begin to doubt yourself, and you begin to feel, well, maybe I'm not quite as good as the gentleman I sat next to who's from Europe at the University of Chicago, even though I beat them at the school.
Of course.
But because you can't fit yourself in the narrative, you begin to question yourself. So I think heritage is very important from my mother's side. The same to my father, by the way. My dad was it's interesting. My dad was an Nkrumah's to the very ounce of his blood. He was the Adjutant General of the Workers' Brigade.
Whoa.
My mother was matron of Northern Ghana, and I mean physical north. Those days, the map was slightly different. And so my first school was Sakasaka School in Tamale. That's where I went to class 1.
Interesting.
That's my first school. My father spoke Yoruba, Hausa, Twi, Fanti, Ga. He was actually born in Kano. Most people don't realize that.
Oh, wow.
My father was born in Kano. My grandfather...
So he can claim Nigerian heritage?
Oh, he did. He can. Very much so. And he spent decades of his life in Nigeria. But my grandfather at that time was the accountant for UAC in Kano. And so that's so. All my father's siblings were born there. Until he came back to Ghana in 1947. Was a raving activist for independence. Nkrumah's to the core. He believed, this is a gentleman who started walking from Secondary to Accra to...
A fitness freak?
To the core. That's where the Ahomka came from.
Oh, okay, because your father is actually an Ahomka-Lindsay. What's the full name?
The family name is Ahomka-Lindsay.
What's your dad's full name?
It's Robertson, Kwasi, Betche, Ahomka-Lindsay.
Okay.
Then once long story, but once he started teaching at the Saddle, that's where he first taught Afrifa. My father taught Afrifa in at the Saddle College. He then started, he was a fitness, so he got people doing fitness, and they started saying, Ahomka, Ahomka, just Ahomka. And then he was a fitness person. He would walk from Secondary to Accra because he was unhappy with what was going on in colonialism. I was reading that somebody was walking from Kumasi to Accra, and I said, this my father was doing in the 1950s. My father went to the Sahara Desert to protest against the French because they were testing nuclear weapons. My father was training as a guerrilla with Che Guevara in DRC Congo. So when you have that kind of heritage, you need to sit down and say to yourself, hold on a minute, where do I fit into this? And also it gives you a strength, inner strength, to make you understand that I also have a heritage and a history, and I have something to offer.
So your gene pool is a very lucky one.
I feel extremely, extremely lucky. And I feel obliged on myself to do justice to my forefathers and mothers.
Let me pull you back to the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Mm-hmm. You're serving under Alan Chirmating.
That's correct.
Quite a charismatic leader.
Yes, he is.
And a sharp one too.
Yes.
But you yourself are a born leader. How do you two get along? Two leaders on the same boat?
I've known Alan. I got Alan through my days when he was in Empitech. That time I was portfolio manager for CDC. And Empitech had a great working with him. I knew Alan through his time when he was ambassador to the US. That time I was with Coke, supporting many things that was going on there. And I wanted not to be in the political forefront. One of the things I've always admired about our constitution, there's many things I have issues with. One of the things I admire is that we understood that skill set does not reside in Parliament alone. In fact, we know for a fact it does not. And that the president only has to have majority. So if we use the current president, Mahama's 60, it just means 31 must come from Parliament. 29 can come from anywhere else. And so my interest was industry. And that's a portfolio that Alan and I agreed with President Kufuor's blessing, because we discussed it. In fact, that's not where he wanted me to go, but that's for another day. But I wanted that because I felt that that is an area I could add the most value. And so I was very happy to get on with it, to focus on that, to focus my attention on that. I always thought myself more as a technocrat, even though I think in Ghana these days that is a word that is often not used.
In a nation where mechanization has not been taken up as seriously as it should, where technology has not been used to its best effect, what exactly about industry attracted you?
Here is some salient. The only way we as a country can develop is through industrialization, period. There is no ifs, buts, or maybe, or what. There is no other way. Industrialization is the only way we can create enough jobs for young men and women. Industrialization is the only way where we can build the practical skill set. I'm not talking about university degrees. The practical skill sets of the ordinary man and woman in Ghana to allow them to build their life in the image and manner they want. Industrialization is the only way we will build wealth, not poverty alleviation or reduction. I have no interest in being less poor. Poor is poor. Keep that somewhere else. We want to build wealth. What does that mean? It means, in effect, we have to, as a people, add value to whatever we do. We have to process. So if you remember very well, I love this. There used to be a Minister of Agriculture, Minister Deborah, during President Kufuor's time. He had a quote, which I quote often. He said, often in Ghana, we love our farmers, but most of our farmers are engaged in gardening, not farming.
True. True.
We are subsistent, I call it subsistence plus farming. So we will never, ever, ever have food security if all we do is subsistence plus. And by the way, if you look at the evolved countries in the world, what percentage of the population work in agriculture or agro-processing for that matter?
I even look at Holland. It's waterlogged, and yet they're growing produce to export.
Agriculture is a key aspect of industrial development, but it is not the greatest absorber of of people. This is something we need to accept. The other thing we need to accept that this is a journey. It's not it's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Yep.
So right now, for instance, I look at Ghana. I hear some wonderful discussions by AI and the rest, and I'm smiling to myself saying, they must be living in a different world. What we need right now in Ghana is labor-intensive industries. Why? Because we have millions of young men and women who need a job. They don't need AI.
So jumping to AI will even cut more out of the job market.
We need labor-intensive industries to absorb the millions. You can start talking about AI in 20, 30 years. That's somebody else's dialogue. By the way, if you look at the evolution of countries like Japan, even China, Singapore, we always follow,
Malaysia.
South Korea, Malaysia, they went through the same process. They didn't jump from A to Z. You can't. We don't have the skill set today in Ghana to be talking about AI. We don't have it. Or if we do, we'll be absorbing 3% of the population, which is a waste of time. 3% and the 97% which don't have a job, how do you balance that out? So it is very important, and that is why I still to this day believe that industry. Now there's one other factor. Government is terrible at managing any business. They don't know how to do it. It is not the nature of business.
You've been in government, so you will know.
We can't do it. We should just keep away from it. Don't even try. It doesn't mean government hasn't got a role to help. Let me be very clear on that. But stop managing businesses. It doesn't work. Why? Because we can't keep our fingers out of it. Look at Ghana Airways. Today, we are sitting here today. I feel embarrassed.
We don't have a plane of our own.
We don't have an airline. That is so embarrassing. And yet logistics and the importance of logistics is a key aspect of industrial development. Be it air, sea, or land. We have to rely on third parties. Now,
where is Kwame Nkrumah's Black Star Line?
My dad bought the first roll in West Africa, both here in Nigeria. For those people who are Arsenal fans, you may know who David Dean is.
Yeah, of course.
David Dean's business, how he got his money to buy the piece of Arsenal, was through sugar. He was exporting sugar to Ghana and Nigeria.
Whoa.
That's how they made their business. So the bottom line is all of this is that logistics is a key. So I ask people, for instance, if you look at a company like Coca-Cola, which people admire, what do you think is their biggest strength? People tend to think, oh, the biggest brand, Coke, Fanta, Sprite, they have over 200 by the way. I said, no. It's the fact that if Coke bought Belaqua today, they can get this to every corner of the continent of Africa within 1 week.
Distribution, logistics, transportation.
That is the strength. If to get my product from here to Nigeria, I have to go through hell and back, then I may make the most appropriate, best tasting packaging, but I can't get it to the market.
You can get it to the end user.
Waste of time. So all of this is a critical element of what it is that we need to do when we talk about it, when we talk about industrialization. And that is why industry for me and the private sector, we're not going anywhere without it. In China, government backs private sector way beyond the laws of WTO.
Of course.
By the way, they do it. US backs it.
To the point of protectionism. The point of protectionism.
Everybody does it. That's why it's called the UK government and American government, not the Ghana government. Our job in Ghana government is to back our own. Is to, frankly, without sounding too bad, bend the rules as far as we can to the protection and support. I prefer to use the word support because support has more, for me, more to it than just protecting. Support means I need to find a way of making sure you win, but win in a manner that is sustainable.
Help your entrepreneurs grow so they can employ your youth.
In terms of, and without that, if we don't, you know, Dangote is people. You know where Dangote started his world? Dangote was a clearing agent in Lagos Port. He worked with my dad and David Dean.
Interesting.
That is why he started his career. And he's been built. He built up. Today, we call him the richest African. But he started somewhere. He was a clearing agent at Lagos Port. This is the fact. So, and I look back and I look at the science of this world that we used to have. That used to have businesses. Today,
that were killed by government.
If we start that dialogue, we're not going to finish today. But the bottom line is this.
But even the administration you served also killed businesses.
You know, one of the areas that I've been sad about, to be honest with you, is our lack of implementation, between the rhetoric and implementation. And that is a problem for me. We cannot go anywhere if we don't accept the fact that our charity truly begins at home. When we talk about businesses, when we talk about supporting our own, you cannot be the only person in the street with water or electricity, because sooner or later everybody else in the street will jump over your wall and collect the water from your house. It doesn't work that way. Your money, whatever money you make, whatever wealth you build, is more sustainable if, as we talk about, the trickle-down effect of market economy comes in. If you stop it, it doesn't work. And yes, absolutely, too many businesses of the past 8, 10, 15 years have closed up and gone. And that must stop. It must stop. We can't just have 2 in and 3 out. Net is what? -1. We must stop it. It brings me one of my, you know, a lot of people don't realize the Kwasi, but my background is in finance. I'm not even a public, my background is in finance.
We will go there. We will go there when we come back, because I have many questions to ask by former Chief Executive of the Ghana Investment Promotion Center and former Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry, Robert Ahomka-Lindsay. When we come back, we'll find out about specific programs that he introduced at the GIPC, specific programs that he worked on at the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and then we will go back into time to look at his work, experience and record that has led him here. Right here on Master of the Game after this.
20 2024 has been an amazing year, but I believe 2025 is going to be much better. We at Hisense want to say a very big thank you to you for patronizing us. Stay blessed and Happy New Year. I go by the name Dance God Lloyd. Official Poll!
2025, we can't wait to see you. We can't wait to have fun with you. Hisense loves you. It's your girl Afrenita, Official Pa.
2024, so Hisense money koye maudia. And then 2025, a triple. Yes, so friends, Hisense the Ghana for you now say. Who costs no money yenye juma? Yet damn say. Hisense for Official Pa. Hisense. Everyday prices for everyday people.
Hello everyone, I welcome you to Tabia Company Limited, the multiple award-winning and leading herbal manufacturing company in Ghana, which has operated for over 15 years, producing herbal medicine of the highest quality and giving Ghanaians the best in malaria care and treatment, as well as other various ailments. I introduce you the finest and most preferred malaria products on the market, Tabia Herbal Mixture. Tabia Herbal Mixture is effective for malaria treatment and all symptoms associated with malaria. Tabia Herbal Mixture is produced from herbs carefully handpicked, and it's scientifically proven to be medicinal and approved for consumption. And its effectiveness and performance is testified by users universally. Tabia Herbal Mixture is also for loss of appetite and general body pain. Since quality is our hallmark, our medicine is produced under the best and safest condition, and it's been approved by the Food and Drugs Authority.
We've been to many countries. We've been to Madagascar, we've been to Uganda, we've been to Democratic Republic of Congo, we've been to Nigeria, and we're here. And I must say that this is among the best. What we saw here today is among the best of the ones we have seen so far.
In terms of competition, Tabia Herbal Mixture is number one and second to none in the herbal industry.
Factory besides herbal medicine. Nti yerishum na mudin Tabia herbal manufacturing company. Nti yedebedu ha yakọ round. Na mo yakọ round no. Obia ni age. Utumi hu say team no obia aboniti ase. Ye share more fully automated bottling machine. Etumi yakọ labeling. Na we are packaging no. Na che say ye nika. Nti utumi share one of the leaders no, your friend Dr. Osi Kasilo, our advisor for traditional medicine, our Afro, it is African region, WHO. Okay, say, adia webehui, and can ye manka African na momu etumi duplicate manufacturing company like this, herbal medicine. I'm a yendro kwa bruchila na eko baby a womu who's Africa for yewo bibi.
Anytime you're diagnosed of malaria or you test positive for malaria, get yourself Tabia Herbal Mixture. The medicine is available in all leading pharmaceutical shops nationwide. Take 2 tablespoons 3 times daily before meals. The medicine is not recommended for lactating mothers, pregnant women, and children under 12 years. I introduce to you another potent product from the Tabia family. It is the Tabia Zanicare. It boosts the immune system and aids the antibodies in your body to help fight against diseases and ailments. If you're a woman and you're fighting infections, if you're a man and you're fighting sexually transmitted infection, look no further than Tabia Zanicare. Go to any nearest pharmaceutical shop near you and get yourself Tabia Zanicare. It is effective, it is potent, and it's efficacious. Take 2 tablespoons 3 times daily and you'll be free from all infections. The medicine is not recommended for lactating mothers, pregnant women, and children under 12 years. Tabia Zanicare, Yekromuche.
Evergreen memories. Wow. We can do things in front of him. Abra ya bafu for na parenting edi omo enkwada eba. You know, one corner and me put something say, and a baby, but I'm check. We bonded as colleagues at the dining hall, the dormitories, classrooms. It just said, you not can you boom up. But the question is, and I will be able to hey, now squad you are here. Or like you are here. Floozy. Any boys in here, where you stay, maybe a school, you are buying the coin. The minimum to coin, the minimum university. The minimum Babrabomo 70, you have to retire to the villages. We are here to reunite you and ensure that we can help each other. But before that, I will call St. Louis, Ola, Wegehi, Holiko, Preset, St. Peter's, and now Bishop Herman, and St. Augustine, just as the platform for you. CTV Adaroma, the most program neighbor, Family and Friends Reunion. Join me, Dr. Kufi Anna, on Family and Friends Reunion as we share memories and experiences in life, only on CTV, Ghana's #1.
CTV, Ghana's #1.
Master of the Game with Darwah, Kwasi Kyei Darwah, and my special guest, Robert Ahomka-Lindsay, economic advisor to 5 African presidents, former chairman of Cal Bank Ghana, and many, many more. He also served as Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry in Ghana, and before that, he served as the Chief Executive Officer, GIPC, where I worked as Director of Public Affairs and Communications. So I want to take you back to Ghana Investment Promotion Center. For somebody with a background in finance, who had also risen to a position where your company says, look, you do this so well, we also want you to come and handle public affairs and communications, and that's Coca-Cola. How did you come into Ghana to head the GIPC?
It's a very interesting story. Thanks for that. You know, at that time, I was on the President Kufuor's Economic Advisory Council and 4 other African presidents, as you mentioned. And I guess because it was Ghana, I took so much more interest. We used to go to Akosombo, you know, Akosombo Hotel. There is a place that would have meetings there. And I was so intensely into all the things the ministers were presenting that I think probably I took too much interest. And I'd known President Kufuor even before that, and I said Alan prior to that. And President Kufuor always used to, afterwards when we were having more one-on-one and dinner, he said, you know, Ahomka, and I will say it in English, but you can imagine him saying in his excellent tree, you know, you're saying so much, but whenever we ask people like yourself to come, you run away. You say to us that you will come at retirement. When at that retirement, you have no energy to be doing all of these things. And, you know, and that stuck in my mind, and linked into all the things that I believed in. Eventually, you know, I said to President Kufuor, I am going to give him my notice. It took me nearly 2 years between when I said that to when I came. So between President Kufuor...
At this point, what were you at Coca-Cola?
I was Vice President Public Communication for Africa and Middle East. My dad, my wife will tell you, doing very well. Let me just leave it at that. And but I wanted to come home. I actually wanted to celebrate my 40th birthday in Ghana, which is what I did. I wanted to make sure that I was in Ghana physically on my 40th birthday. And so President Kufuor did it. And also Uncle Sam Okudzeto too. Wonderful gentleman.
He took a very keen interest in you, I'm told.
You know, he was very, very clear. I remember one time when South Africa, I was as an event there. That time of Coke, South Africa was part of it. And I think I was speaking at some event. And he came, realized I was Ghanaian, and in not so many words told me in short shrift that you need to come home. You need to come and do your bit. And I've always had that passion to do that. So eventually, I gave him my notice. It took me about 1.5 years between when I mentioned to Coke that I wanted to come home to when I actually came, because you just don't up and go. You have to plan a transition, and you know, corporates, there's time frame you have to do these things in. And when I came, and this, I am not breaking any confidence, because President Kufuor actually mentioned this in our last meeting of his advisory council. GIPC was not the first job he offered me. The other ones, and Kojo Pianim was also aware, chief of staff. I think one of them I said to Mr. President, please, they will eat me alive in that particular place. So let me not go there.
Which one is this?
Let me just say that.
Now, I'm curious.
It was more in a ministerial role, let me put it that way. I said they will eat me alive. I am not I need a transition base to let me understand the system. I wanted to be a technocrat than a pure pure politician, if I can put it that way. So eventually we settled on GIPC, and we got to the center, and I said, Mr. President, will you allow me to, you know, restructure, refocus the attention of the GIPC? And I will never forget, I had an interview, Mrs. Villiers, who I'm sure you know, wonderful lady. She was on the board. I remember her asking me in the interview, why are you coming to Ghana? Are you sure you want to come to Ghana? And I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying this, but she asked me to this day, she says, why are you, why did you want to come to Ghana? I said, I want to come home. I left here when I was 7. I came at 40. I need to come home. I need to find a way back. But when I got to the center, you see, I know, you know, it was a tough one. There were 2 or 3 areas I want to talk about the center. The first thing I realized is that, not to put a finer point on it, we did not have the right people to do the job government and the people of Ghana expected us to do. So we had a situation, for instance, where we had more secretaries than investment promotion officers. We had more drivers than investment promotion officers. We had people who were, not to put a finer point on it, were not qualified to be in that situation. And the center was not focused. So I went and asked the president, Mr. President, I need to change this. I need the people.
In terms of reference, were you looking at the Saudi investment promotion? Were you looking at the US investment promotion? Were you looking at Korea? Who were you looking at? Singapore?
2
Malaysia?
key ones, Singapore and Malaysia.
Interesting.
I'm a great fan of Lee Kuan Yew. I'm a great fan. And what he did. And given that he'd also come to Ghana, as you know, and wrote a couple of books, which are also very interesting, worth reading. But my basis was both Japan, Singapore, and Malaysia, because I liked what they're doing. For me, the US was very different. US and UK had very different history. So it was difficult for us to try and emulate them. We didn't have the longevity of 700 years of kings and the rest of it. We don't have those things here. We have, ours is very different. So that was my model. And I said, no, we need to restructure. And we did. We went through the process. We gave early retirement and gave, we sacked people. There's no other way of putting it. But I made sure, and I went through the process, the Guy Employment Association, we did everything. And we paid them all their money. In fact, when I paid that money, I also paid the 1982 people who had been sacked had not been paid. This was in 2007. They had had a reorganization.
How did you secure the funding?
This is interesting, actually, another very important point. You know, at that time, and I believe the case is now, we have never had issues getting money. I actually don't think money, I know money, people think about that, but...
Was this from the IGF? Was this from internally generated fund? Or you had to speak to the one you reported to, who was the president?
So a couple of things we did. First of all, I spoke to the president and said, what can we do? And he said, remember we were going through HIPC. We do not have money. And I said, Mr. President, I am going to go and look for money. We spoke to the biggest contributor for the budget of the GIPC was the donor companies. They gave us over $18 million.
At the time, was GTZ involved?
GTZ, all of them. The Danida were very, very important as the Danish arm, FMO, Propaco, and our development partners, the British. We put together what was at that time called the almost an integrated development plan. And the GIPC was one of the implementing agencies. Normally, they didn't give you money in advance, but they gave us all the money. They actually deposited close to $18 million in our bank account. By the way, when I left GIPC, I left over $6.5 million in the bank, cash. I also reorganized the way we were getting revenue. In all the time I was in the center, we got less than 10% of our expenditure was from government, including paying for offices, computers. But they gave us the funding. So we let go about 45 people. We had red flags, we had all the issues. But
what percentage of that was the staff strength?
That was about 70%. But we also recruited 38 young Ghanaians, who to this day are still at the center. Also, we recruited directors, people like yourself. So one of the things I said, for instance, is that if we wanted to attract greater financial services companies into Ghana, my director of financial services must have on his phone the phone number, direct phone number of 80% of the heads of banks, or you can't do that job. If you want to be PAC, Public Affairs and Communication Director, and you don't have all the media houses, I'm not talking about the journalists, I'm talking about the heads.
And even you know, the media houses abroad, which is what I had too.
You cannot do the job.
Exactly.
And you know that those people were paid for by the donors. The government did not pay for the directors. At that time, we were paying them, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, in 2008, we were paying them $5,000. And they was not being paid.
I needed more. I needed more.
But then, this was 2007.
True.
So we did that. I also reorganized the GIPC into sectoral base.
Yep.
Based on what you wanted. But the 30, I think it was 36 that we recruited. They didn't come to the GIPC straight away. They spent 6 weeks at GIMPA, where I set up a specific course with GIMPA, including report writing, finance for non-finance manager, and time management. You know,
it was not only training, it was also indoctrination.
I needed to understand what we were expecting of them. One of the things I really have difficulty with is time management. I cannot stand it. And this was one of the things...
I saw how early you showed up for the interview, and I told my staff, I said, you see, that's my boss.
Yeah.
So when I tell you guys you're late, you don't understand.
But we needed to teach people that, because if you've been brought up in an environment where everybody turns up late, maybe you begin to accept that that's the modus operandi, that's how things should be. So we taught them time management. And it was before, so 6 weeks after being employed is when they actually started. And I went back to my days as a graduate. But GIPC, we had a good time. I really enjoyed it. One of the things we did is, I hear people today talk about tax exemption. I thought this was very interesting.
No, but let me mention this, if you remember this. We had so much tax exemption for companies that were making so much profit and expatriating all their funds. And you came in and said, no, this has to end. That was bold.
80% at that time of all our tax exemptions went to 5 companies. Not the mining companies, they were all telecoms companies. And so I looked at this and I said, hold on. First of all, Ghanaian companies was next to zero. We didn't give them to Ghanaian companies. Remember, one of the departments I set up was an aftercare, focused specifically on Ghanaian companies. And we also introduced Ghanaian companies to start registering more and more with the center, because I needed to know what they were doing so we could have policies that were pro them. And I looked at this analysis, and so I went to see President Kufuor. And again, I must give President Kufuor the credit. He gave me the latitude, once he agreed and understood, to get things done. So I went to President. I said, Mr. President, this is the graph. And all of these companies had no business having tax exemption at that stage, because policies are not in perpetuity. They must be time-bound.
And they must expire.
Sector-specific and objective-specific. So you know what you want. Once you've achieved them, you must change. Otherwise, they become archaic and not fit for purpose. So I praised President Kufuor. I said, President Kufuor, why is Ghana Telecom, at that time, the biggest recipient of a tax exemption? I don't understand. Why is that time was Scancom, MTN, all of them? I don't get it. When Ghanaian companies are complaining bitterly that we seem to be more interested in helping foreigners than our own. And so I said, Mr. President, I want to put this to an end. I explained it. Chief of Staff was there. I got looks that said, hey, Mr. President, it can be done. So I called in the CEOs of all of those 5 companies into the GIPC. They came with the PAC people, as you can imagine. Yeah. At that time, in fact, they should rest in peace, Mawina Dumo was working for MTN to be. Yeah. And I asked all the PAC people to sit outside because this was going to be a one-on-one between myself
and the CEOs.
And I explained to them, you've had it good. No problem. For the next 3 months, you can continue to bring in all the goods and equipment you want tax-free. But thereafter, you're going to pay tax. I think there was shock in the room. And people thought, I said, I'm sorry. I think that within 30 minutes of them leaving, I had a phone call from the castle. That time, the president was at the castle. I won't say who called. They said, Omabaho. They have come. And they got this. And within 3 months, we stopped it. If you ask GRA, they should go back, they'll tell you how much their revenues increased after that 3 months. Tax exemptions are a necessity and part of development. The question
what does
is
it take for a CEO to take bold decisions and stand by them, especially in the face of political patronage?
I think what helped me is 2 things. One, President Kufuor's support. I reported to him. He is Chief of Staff, Mr. Mpiani. Even DK Osei, you remember Ambassador DK Osei, they were all very... The President knew what I was doing before I came there. So he knew that I was talking from a position of knowledge. The second thing that helped me is that I know those corporates. I've worked on the other side. I realize they don't need it. And this is a butter on top of the bread, not the bread.
Even though they don't need it, if you offer it, they will take it.
Why would I say no? If you're offering that thing and you don't realize you don't need it anymore, I am not government. I'm the corporate sector.
So essentially, we were formulating policies that were hurting us.
We had policies there, and because nobody ever reviewed them, because they just sat on the books, they were hurting us. They were counterproductive to where we needed to do. But we had never reviewed it. Or if we reviewed it, I can't talk for my predecessors, but perhaps they could not get the support.
Could one say the same about the Constitution of Ghana?
Personally, I think the Constitution of Ghana has lost its purpose. We have a constitution that I think has, and I use this word carefully, we have taken 2 systems, the executive system of the Americans and the parliamentary system of the British, put it together and created a dog's dinner, as they say, which is a mess. We've tried to have a parliamentary with an executive, and we messed it all up. We also have a constitution that was designed to frankly protect the ex-erstwhile PNDC.
It's like a committee put together to design.
Sorry, that was what it was.
Horse. What did they get?
It was written in late 80s, 90s, early 90s. We have evolved since then. We are not the same Ghana in 1989, 1991, 92. If you look at other constitutions, very rarely do they stay the same. There are tenets of it which we know is solid. One that, in fact, President Kufuor had announced at this time that we need to get rid of is this idea of parliamentarians sitting in the executive. Decide what you want. You want to be an executive or parliamentary? If you want to go to a parliamentary rule, no problem. Get rid of presidential. Parliament, the leader of Parliament's biggest party, forms the government.
That's it.
Parliament can get rid of the leader without going back to election.
That's it.
What I love about the British system. If you want to be an executive, then have an executive. Parliament focus on legislature. Forget this idea of MP sitting in. Focus on your job as keeping account.
The MP wants to be minister, and the Constitution makes it so.
We need to change it. It has lost, to be honest with you, as far as I am concerned, that particular clause, in fact, has made politics very difficult for us in Ghana. Very difficult. If you look at some of the challenges we have had over the years, it is to do with that particular clause.
And I think
too much power also is in the hand of the president. It's way too much.
But to make it even worse, the very legislature which is meant to hold the president accountable, is dancing to catch his eye so they may be appointed as ministers.
That is why I'm saying that it was designed, it was written in a particular environment. You saw the Constitution, it exempted all sorts of people. It gave immunity to all sorts of people. We've gone past that. But the reality is that that Constitution today does not work for us Ghanaians. So I am very glad to hear there's a Constitutional Review Committee. I am very saddened, and I will say this publicly, that we, as the MPP, did not do that in the 8 years. It saddens me.
That's a shame.
But let's see what happens. But that Constitution needs to be amended for the better. As we evolve, it's like laws. The laws you had in the 1800s, you can't apply them today. The world is different.
Permit me to ask you this question, if you will. You have a construct in the Constitution where a body is formed that gives advice to the president. But the same Constitution says the president is not obliged to take their advice. That body is given their pay and their perks. And this is not cheap.
Council of State.
It's very expensive. I'm glad you mentioned it yourself.
As I sit here today, if I was asked my opinion, I am a great fan of the British parliamentary system. I would create an upper house, but those in it would not be what people may think. That upper house, I will put some of our chiefs. That upper house, I will put some of our traditional leaders, both male and female. That upper house, I will put some learned people who have retired, and then give it teeth. But the only teeth that upper house has to succumb to is the elected legislature, which is the MPs. If you look at the House of Lords, they can push. But if the House of Commons, which is elected legislature, even though now the House of Lords has elements of elected in it and appointed, is where they get a majority say, no, we've heard you, but we decide we are the representative of the people, therefore X. You can't have your cake and eat it. There is no point to putting an advisory council whose mandate is to advise. So what if I don't like it? Then I go my own way. You put too much power. It doesn't matter what party that person is in. You put in too much power in one person's hand.
Can you imagine what industry, the amount we're using to pay for this extraneous construct that does not serve us well?
Kwasi,
what kind of industry could create for young people?
Kwasi, for me, it's not even the money. I think it's more even fundamental than that. We are not developing. The money is an aspect, but more important to me is the fact that we don't have a system that helps us make better decisions. Because that's what all this is about. It's about how we create a system that helps us make better decisions. Better in the sense that it is in the interest of the country, the people. So money is important, I get it. But money is fungible. Money is fungible. I have never in my time, both in the ministries or GIPC or in the private sector, had any problem raising money. Never had any problem. What I've had problem with is getting people to believe that your business plan, you're going to do it.
I have a problem with having elected officials and appointed officials waste resources that can create employment for the youth of Ghana.
I can understand that and I sympathize with that. I can understand that and I sympathize with that. Again, I've talked about the Constitution. I don't understand why with less than 40 billion people, we have so many MPs. Have you looked at the composition of the breakdown of the biggest constituency in terms of number of population and some of the smallest? The variance is huge. But again, this is a dialogue we must have. I cannot understand why one constitution is 200 and something, another one is 60,000.
Our dialogues, I think our dialogues are too long.
Well, that's another. So we've had a number of, I think President Kufuor did it. President Arthur Mills did it. I must tell you a story about that one time. Did it. President Kufuor also did it. President Mahama did it. You're right. We do like
our dialogues are too long.
We do like to talk. Maybe it's time to implement
our dialogues
to get things done. I am I'm hoping.
Because we can have clarity about what should the population be for us to call it a constituency, so that if we have to redraw the lines every 10 years, then we have to redraw the lines every 10 years, or maybe encourage people to have more children in the constituency, so you know that, you know, we are
average should be 100,000, let's say. In the same way we have municipalities, districts, and metro. There is a
so that when we give you resources, we know that the resources are not for the grass and sheep, they are for the human beings, and we're looking at these numbers to form a constituency.
I think, look, I'm really hoping that part of that dialogue will talk about that, because again, I understand the financial issue, but I really come from a very strong belief that the biggest hindrance where we don't fix these things is that we're not evolving, we're not developing, because we end up we're making what I will call suboptimal decisions. I'm going to give an example. You all hear Coca-Cola Company. At one stage, they introduced what they call was the new Coke. You recall? We thought this was going to be the second best thing since Christ. Literally. It was an unmitigated disaster. Disaster. They had to roll it back so fast. But then in that situation, the system got to a stage where they said, you know something? Our consumers are telling us we don't want it.
So the system corrected itself.
Consumers, we don't want it. If the consumer says don't want it, change it. If the lecturers say we don't like this system, change it, because your job is to satisfy the consumer, your lecturer, those who you serve, those who you wish to get economic gain for if you are in the private sector, become important.
The arrogant politician says, oh, the voters don't know anything. We tell them what to think.
Well, I think Ghana is changing. You just have to look at the last round. That will give you a good sense. I think it is my honest belief that we are evolving, we are developing, and I think that is good for the country. For politicians, and now whether I like it or not, I'm in that category, for us to realize that actions have consequences.
I never thought I'd call you a politician.
I know, but I think the reality is that...
I think you're more a public servant than a politician.
That kind of distinction is very difficult in our environment.
No, because, you know, politics is very clear. I mean, Thomas Sowell's definition of politics is the one I like. He says politics is the art of making your selfish desires seem like the public interest. Like the public interest, yeah.
So it is a very, you know, when I came into Ghana, I want to be a technocrat. That is what I want to do. Because I remember, you know, same thing at the center, had the GIPC. We do not have an endless pool of talent in Ghana. We have talent, resource, and therefore, I always believed that there must be room for technocrats. There are certain ministries, departments, agencies of government which by definition require expertise. And let me paraphrase my definition of expertise. We are not in the academic field. For me, expertise is not how many degrees you have.
No.
Expertise is a function to me of both your academic, but even more importantly, your application, which tells me what work have you done to prove that you're able to apply the theory to the practice successfully. Which makes me believe you can run this ministry, this department, or this agency.
And that brings me to a discussion I had with my journalist here, and the lead journalist, Mr. Asante Bosumpim, and later Valentina. I said, why is it that when we're appointing ministers or appointing chief executives, our focus is on their university degrees and not their practice and achievement? Because I just hear all the university degrees, not the practice and achievement. Now look at the industrialists that you've worked with in the world, and the biggest CEOs and captains of industry you've worked with in the world. Now look at Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk. Who's talking about their degrees? We're talking about achievements and accomplishments.
An interesting analogy to that is look at the business card you get when you meet my peers, let me call it that. You see lots of letters before the name, and lots of letters after the name. In my time in the corporate world, the only thing you see in there is the man's name or woman's name. There's no letters before and after. Why? Because academic qualification shows that you have the potential. Once I've seen what you've implemented, tells me you have had the capacity and ability to succeed successfully.
You want to say that again?
Academic qualifications tells me you have the potential. Once I've seen the work you have done, tells me you've been able to implement the theory and been able to be successful at that.
Well, I had a professor who puts it differently.
I know.
He says academic qualification shows that you have the ability to learn and pass exams. End of story.
In all my interviews, Kwasi, when I interviewed the KPMG, nowhere has anybody asked me, except for when I went to vetting in Parliament, about what degrees and what my A-levels and O-levels were. Nobody's ever asked me. But KPMG was talking about rugby. At CDC, I was playing cricket with the governor of the Central Bank of the UK before I even had the job. At the Coke, we were talking about politics and African development. You need that to enter the room, to be on the table. But what should allow you to get the job is what you have done. Skills. We're not lecturers. Let me take example the GIPC.
Yep.
The CEO of the GIPC is the Chief Marketing Officer of Ghana.
Of course.
Period.
That's it.
Your job is to go sell the country.
That's it.
And make sure people come.
And this is why I've always told people that to lead GIPC or the Ghana Export Promotion Center, you must be one of the best public affairs and communication directors in this country. If not, you have no business being there. It's that simple.
You can't. And I would even argue that not only that, but you need to add to the fact that you must have been in that sector. Recently I went to Riyadh, and I went there. I was invited by James Zan, who is the UNCTAD CEO, and he's retired now. And they were holding the 22nd World Investment Conference. And James reminded us, I'd forgotten, we had the first World Investment Conference here in Ghana in 2008.
WIPA, and then UNCTAD.
All here. UNCTAD 12 was held in Ghana.
Exactly.
And the first one was done here in Ghana.
And interestingly, my company worked for WIPA before I came to join GIPC.
So when, for instance, government of Ghana was negotiating with Vodafone, the CEO of Vodafone Europe was an ex-employee of Coca-Cola Europe.
So you should have been the broker.
It's not even, the point is that what he's saying, I know exactly where he's coming from. So he cannot pull the wool over my eyes. Vodafone is another whole story. But the bottom line is that it helps when you have been in that sector and having a dialogue with them. Even the respect across the table is a very different dialogue.
When I look at the likes of Mr. Afaridonko, and then Frank Edu, and then Jude Aining, and Edward Efa, and others in this field of endeavor, banking and finance. Would you say that there are certain specializations where we have limited human resource in this country, and therefore when we are seeking people to lead, we should just forget about partisanship and look for expertise?
There is a lot of sectors. There's a lot of sectors I will put that. I would, for instance, say, and by the way, let me put a caveat, I'm not looking for a job. I just want to be clear, I'm not looking for a job. But I would argue that there are certain sectors of the economy where we should put the best person to run it. For example, finance and economic planning. I'm sorry. You have to have somebody that understands, has probably worked in the Bretton Woods institution, World Bank, has worked. I'm not talking about an accountant, please. There's a difference between an accountant, somebody who does auditing.
Maybe project and specialized finance.
You need to understand all of that element. You must have worked in a situation where you've been involved in treasury management, understand asset and liability management, not just read about it. You must have done it. I would argue the same thing in trade and industry, that you need to have certain specialized skills. We seem to have accepted that from one area of our economy, Attorney General, Minister of Justice. Maybe because we have so many lawyers in the country. But I think that's probably the only place where we've accepted that the person must have had a legal XXS. But the same place for finance. I would argue that
the same must even play for tourism and culture.
I would agree 100%. Agriculture. You need to have had that experience.
Oil and gas management?
Oil and gas. Agencies, GNPC. Even football. You need to, you know, there's a reason why football coaches go and take courses. They don't just wake up and say, I used to play football really well, therefore make me the coach.
No.
The two skills are very different. Medical profession. There's a difference between being a doctor and being a hospital administrator. The two are not the same. There are many sectors of our economy today because we are a developing country. Look, let's take an example. The ex-governor of the Bank of England was a Canadian.
Mark Carney.
Today, he's going to become Prime Minister.
He wants to be Prime Minister of Canada now. But isn't that interesting that England, of all places, with all its investment bankers and all sorts of bankers,
they went to Carney.
And people who run treasuries went to seek somebody with just the expertise and didn't mind that he was not British.
Lee Kuan Yew went for the best and paid them and got the best result. One of the things we must realize today is that when we sit across the table and negotiating with the oil companies, the telecom companies and so forth, do you realize the wealth of backup, research, lawyers, financiers they've got behind them to advise them
before they
see government?
So if government sends our weakest link in the chain...
As we sit here today, and I've made this case, we need to go to the City of London and take the sharpest, the Clifford Chances of this world, the Goldmans, and come and negotiate on our behalf and get the best deal for Ghana. Today I'm hearing about minerals issues. All due respect.
And we're losing our properties in England as well. Did you hear of that?
Yes. We have not because we are silly. I'm not saying Ghanaians are not capable. Far from it. There are Ghanaians negotiating on the other side. Let's go find them. Let's get the experts to negotiate the minerals rights for us. Because we don't have the people. I'm sorry. We just don't have them.
And the best of these people are not necessarily political foot soldiers.
For me, when it comes to those areas, there is a place where you can help. And we are living in a real world. You must help.
Of course.
We live in a real world. We accept that. But at the same time, if we don't develop, those same people 4 years, 8 years down will come to you and say, Ejumanase, the job is no longer there. Or they want to go forward, but they have no new jobs because maybe they've learned the skill, but they can't go forward. So I think these are some of the development pains. Look, Lee Kuan Yew did it. Malaysia did the same thing. You know, Japan, after the Second World War, you know, they went back to basics. I love the Japanese story. 1D, 1F. Japan did the same thing. One district, one factory. They went back to basics because they were flattened, literally.
This was the initiative of your
President
minister.
Akufo-Addo and Alan Chemate.
Yep.
That was the portfolio I was given. And I recall all sorts of dialogue and people saying, oh, it's not. I said, look, I'm sorry.
But unfortunately, it ended up people doing their own thing, not with government funding. It looked like a hoax.
The support base had questions to be answered. But I can assure you 110%, Kwasi, there is no better policy we have today for industrial transformation of this country. There is none. If they have, people should bring it forward. We must create industry at the district and regional level. That is the only way. We must add value at the district and regional level. How do you want to do it? Then we can debate. But don't debate the fact you must add value. They can't all come to Accra or Kumasi. And by the way, what is in Accra and what is here? Is there gold in Accra? There's no gold here.
There's traffic.
This is administrative capital. So, if we don't learn all the ancillary, yes, there is no doubt The capital base supported. I sat with all the banks. We talked about this thing. Basis. I know there's a big discussion now about tax exemption for the companies. All of these things, I want us to debate it, but we should divorce it from trying to argue that district industrialization is not a good thing.
But the last government had 8 good years to industrialize. What happened?
Well, the first thing I would say...
Was it because Alan stepped down to go and run his campaign? Was it because you also chose to leave at the end of the first term? What exactly happened?
I think for me, there's a number of issues there we must address. First of all, industrialization doesn't happen in an 8-year cycle. It will take us 30 years of consistent policy, consistency, consistent policies to allow us to change. That's the first point. The second point is that I think we must be clear in the implementation of these policies to remove some of the political poison, and I call it that, political poison that comes with the discussion. So one of them, for instance, I will say this because I've said this before. A discussion was said, oh, we thought 1D1F only for new companies. I said, hold on a minute. I should bring in a program, okay, where my existing company, just call Amin Sangara, for instance, in Cape Coast, my father's hometown. I should forget about Amin Sangara, but bring new people.
But it should have been stated with clarity from the beginning.
You can go back and look at all the rhetoric. I never, ever, ever stated that this thing was only for new companies. Even the reporting, we had sectoral basis. But the political poisoning around it turned the thing into a them and us, and that is hurting us. And that is
How
what
do we change that rhetoric?
people say we must have a national development plan, but I have a problem with that. Because the way our politics is structured, everybody wants to differentiate themselves.
No, but that differentiation is not helping us, because if you ask me, my uncle P.V. Obing was the head of the National Development Planning Commission. And I recall having a conversation with him when he says, all Ghana needs the same things. We want peace, we want work, we want our children and our families to be safe, and we want some wealth so we can look after our families.
Please be careful. You are sounding like union government under Chapo.
No, but my point is, all Ghanaians want the same thing.
There is no doubt.
So why is it that every government thinks their manifesto is what will make a decision for Ghana? I think the National Development Planning Commission should have whatever it is, the menu of the 15 necessary things for Ghana, and every party should choose from those 15. So I'll give you a good example.
Okay.
A young man in Burkina Faso who came to power through a coup d'etat has decided to invest 12 billion
in the tomato
tomato factories. Look at the transformation it's doing there. Unfortunately, we have invested more in a pit because our good president promised God he wanted to build a cathedral. This is something that was not in any document anywhere, and some of the people in the previous government got up to defend it. So, why?
Kwasi, let me stick with the tomato as an example. Yep. You know we have a tomato factory in Tamale.
Yep.
Okay. We built that way before Burkina built theirs.
Yep.
You've heard about Commander Sugar?
I know.
Remember I also mentioned earlier on that we do gardening, not farming.
Of course.
Okay. When you put a policy together, you must look at the value chain. We import tomato from Burkina. You know that, in certain times of the year. Our tomato factory, the same as some of our cashew nut factories and other factories we build, same, have one common issue that they're battling with: raw materials.
We don't have produce to look after the factory.
Enough tomatoes to feed 1 week of that tomato factory in the north. We don't produce enough. And the variety of tomatoes we produce is not what the factory wants. You see, sometimes I want us to take a step back.
Who's to blame? The indolence of the farmer?
It is us.
Or the big dreams of the one who built the factory?
I'm using us as a policy makers. You cannot go and build and encourage people to build a factory to process tomato, knowing that they don't have enough raw materials. You don't build Commander with knowing that you don't have enough sugarcane. We do this thing as a political, it looks good.
So we waste national resources.
We waste it, but the point is that we need that factory. There is no doubt we need the factory. We need to process tomatoes. There is no doubt we import all our sugar. We need to process it. But we must add to it. We must add to it. What value chain will make sure we have success? That is why we lose. Our discussion only goes as deep as the factory or Enyejuma. I visited a factory, it was part of my mandate. We don't have enough tomatoes. So what should we do about it? So my question then...
So the policymakers are clueless?
It's a good question. But for me, the challenge I would ask the policymaker, I would ask the Minister of Agriculture, and let me put it in my one, let me not talk about somebody else. Why did we not focus on, and I remember I said my interest is in commercial farming. First of all, they should never have built the Palugu the tomato factory there, without having that factory having its own nuclear farm. You must have a certain percentage of your factory must have its own raw material base.
So you know where your inputs are coming from.
And also you're not relying too much on the vagrancies of who you are buying from. Then you build an outgrower scheme with the small players, provide support so that they provide 30, 40%. But 50, 60% of your raw materials must come from your own. That is why we went short.
This sounds like gross negligence of policymakers.
Without a shadow of doubt, I'm not going to protect anybody.
Negligence of policymakers.
And this is, by the way, it's not just 8 years.
And we pretend they are the knowledgeable ones.
This is 30 years. I'm not talking about 8 years.
When we come back, more with Robert Ahomka-Lindsay, only on Master of the Game, the program on which we bring you the movers, shakers, icons, and legends of Ghana. A great brain on finance, a great brain on public affairs and communications, and a great brain on policy, not afraid to say what is wrong, even with his own. Right back after this.
2024 has been an amazing year, but I believe 2025 is going to be much better. We at Hisense want to say a very big thank you to you for patronizing us. Stay blessed and Happy New Year. I go by the name Dance God Lloyd. Official
2025, we can't wait to see you. We can't wait to have fun with you. Hisense loves you. It's your girl Afrenita, Official
2024 is a Hisense money koye maudia. And then 2025, a triple. Yes, so friends, Hisense the Ghana for you now say. Who costs no money yenye juma? Yet damn say. Hisense mama Official Hisense. Everyday prices for everyday people.
Hello everyone, I welcome you to Tabia Company Limited, the multiple award-winning and leading herbal manufacturing company in Ghana, which has operated for over 15 years, producing herbal medicine of the highest quality and giving Ghanaians the best in malaria care and treatment, as well as other various ailments. I introduce you the finest and most preferred malaria products on the market, Tabia Herbal Mixture. Tabia Herbal Mixture is effective for malaria treatment and all symptoms associated with malaria. Tabia Herbal Mixture is produced from herbs carefully handpicked, and it's scientifically proven to be medicinal and approved for consumption. And its effectiveness and performance is testified by users universally. Tabia Herbal Mixture is also for loss of appetite and general body pain. Since quality is our hallmark, our medicine is produced under the best and safest condition, and it's been approved by the Food and Drugs Authority.
We've been to many countries. We've been to Madagascar, we've been to Uganda, we've been to Democratic Republic of Congo, we've been to Nigeria, and we're here. And I must say that this is among the best. What we saw here today is among the best of the ones we have seen so far.
In terms of competition, Tabia Herbal Mixture is #1 and second to none in the herbal industry.
Factory bi so as we mutumi herbal medicine. Nti yehwehwem na mudin eba Tabia herbal manufacturing company. Nti ye de bedu ha ya call round. Na mom ye call round no. obiara ni agye wotumi hu sɛ team ni no obiara bɔ ne ti ase yɛhwɛ mo fully automated bottling machine a etumi yɛ kɔ ɛyɛ labeling na owia ayɛ packaging no na ɛkyɛ sɛ ɛyɛ nika nti wotumi hwɛ one of the leaders no your friend Dr. Osi Kasilo a ɔne advisor for traditional medicine ɛwɔ Afro no ɛkyɛ sɛ African region WHO no ɔka sɛ adeɛ wɔbɛhu anka ne yɛ manka Africa nyinaa wɔn mu etumi duplicate manufacturing company like this herbal medicine amanyɛ nduro kɔ abrokyira na ɛkɔ beebi a wɔn mu ehu sɛ Africa fo yɛwɔ bibi.
Anytime you're diagnosed of malaria or you test positive for malaria, get yourself Tabia herbal mixture. The medicine is available in all leading pharmaceutical shops nationwide.
My special guest, Robert Ahomka-Lindsay, knowledgeable man on project and specialized finance management, investment promotion, running a ministry with his minister, Alan Chiremating, and just passionate about his beloved motherland, Ghana, but has served in so many enterprises. It got to a point in his life where he was advising on the economy to 5 different African presidents. Tell me about that.
It was wonderful. Both in East Africa and West Africa. So Ghana, Senegal, Mali, Kenya, Tanzania.
How do you get to advise presidents on their finance and economy when you are not exactly a citizen of their country?
I worked very closely with the Bretton Woods Institution, particularly the World Bank and the IMF and the IFC. I've worked very closely with them. And I think my experience in what I'd done in developing finance institution, because I was also involved even when the US was writing AGOA, African Growth and Opportunity Act, I was very involved in that.
There I recall that you put a spanner in the works. You said Ghana was not ready. I have a fight to pick with you on that. You know, but let's stay with the presidents you advised, and I'll come to that in a minute.
So I've always had an passion for Africa. And what they found out often, and those days, and I'm talking here 2000 to 2005, not many Africans were in a high corporate position who had the experience, who the presidents would frankly listen to. But that's the bottom line. And so I was asked, obviously the first one I said I wanted was Ghana. It was home. I was in Kenya, so I knew the Kenyans very well. At Kikwete in Tanzania, Uganda, President Museveni, Senegal. This, by the way, is 20 odd years ago. Makes me feel my age these days, but anyway. So we went there, and our role was very simple. Understanding the private sector, particularly big corporates, understanding what made us decide to invest in country A or B, to advise that president in putting together the types of economic policies that would make him or her more attractive to us.
And when you say what made us, you mean the CDC?
This is, at that time, both the CDC and the Coca-Colas, because I did in both times. So basically looking at corporates, what would make a Vodafone come and invest in Ghana? What would make a Unilever come to Ghana? We were not talking about SMEs at that stage, because that stage we were looking at larger corporates. So the question was looking specifically at your business environment. Laws, taxes, your legal requirement, what registration processes, the cost of doing business, all of that analysis was a part of it. And so I was fortunate enough, at that time, I was in my, how old was I, 32, 33?
Am I right to say you were the first black to lead the Commonwealth Development Corporation?
It was interesting because the CDC, by the way, today is called the British International Investment. CDC's original name, can you imagine, was the Colonial Development Corporation. It was the British government's development finance arm. So French have it, Propaco, Germans, DEG, Dutch, FMO. etc. And their first office globally was in Kenya. And they had never had a black person ever be the regional head. And I was made that, the first one, in Kenya. And I recall at my first engagement with the private sector, there were people that came there because they wanted to see who was the black man who had come as CDC. It was so funny. They came and told me, I remember they came to my face and told me point blank that we just came because we wanted to see who is this African we have heard has come as a regional representative, regional head of CDC in East Africa. We covered a number of countries from there. And so I was very proud to have been breaking that particular glass ceiling. It was important for me to do that because I believe it set the way for others to also come in. And it was a tremendous time in Kenya. I had a wonderful time there. One of my favorite countries. And I remember a story one time with President Museveni where, you know, Ugandans eat plantain, but they like it green. They call it matoke. And they had a huge issue of post-harvest losses. And so he wanted to turn into powder. And I remember we had a meeting at his hometown. President Museveni likes to refer to himself as a cow. He's a farmer. He's a cattle herder or rancher. And I remember the Minister of Agriculture coming to me to plead quietly, saying, please, please, please speak to the president. He's about to order me to turn all this thing to powder. And Ugandans will not eat it. And I remember sitting aside with the president. And I said, Mr. President, he says, Robert, I know what you are going to say. I said, Mr. President, it's not going to work. He said, oh, you Ghanaians, you also. I said, Mr. President, it's not going to work. This powder business, in Ghana, maybe you can make fufu, but in your country, you can't do it. And I recall that. But I think what helped me is that my passion for the continent and the country, and I gave advice based on what I believed in, not what the World Bank or anybody else would tell me, is what I believed in would work. And because of that, we built a very strong relationship with those presidents. President Kufuor, being a prime example, ended up me coming to Ghana.
And when you would give advice and there was pushback, how did you deal with that? Can you give me an example?
I tried to give examples. So one of the areas, for instance, I remember in Ghana was land. I really went on hard at land. This is 2001 and 2. I was really hard on land registration. I said, this is a mess. It is one of the biggest bane on the side of investment. And I gave examples of what other countries had done. I brought examples. By the way, the GIPC was the secretariat for the Ghana Presidential Investment Advisory Council. So there was maybe that's why I ended up at GIPC. But I tried to give examples. And I recall as a result of that, we even got some money from the British government to start the process of reforming the land registry. So it was linked directly to that.
Well, you say that, so easily, but isn't it a problem that a nation, in trying to reform its land issues, needs to raise funds from another government?
You make a very valid point. And I think that is one of the areas we need to evolve as a people.
Do we have any priorities at all as a people?
I think we do. I think our challenge has become in the allocation of resources.
When we are sick, we want free medicine. When we want to reform our land issues, we want free money from somewhere. When we want to build our roads, we want money from somewhere. Are we able to govern ourselves?
Yes, we are. As for that, what do they say? Independence now. Wasn't that the mantra of CPP? That I agree with. Not later. Why? But I also agree with what Nkrumah said when he stated that though we have got political independence, economic independence is going to be a whole different ballgame. And that is the area we've had a problem with.
We've had a problem with it because of the people or leadership?
99% of his leadership. 99% of our challenges, even today as we sit here, is leadership. Round pegs in square holes.
But also character, because we have too many selfish and greedy people who want to be in leadership positions, not to serve the people, but to serve themselves.
I would say Ghana has no more less or more selfish and greedy people. The question is whether or not they get into positions of power. That is our challenge. That is why I'm a great believer, for instance, in us reforming our constitution. Not just the constitution of the country, by the way. I believe in political countries also have to reform the political parties, sorry. So that is why I think we need to reform that, because leadership is everything. Why do corporates every now and then sack all the CEOs and everybody and start again? Because they've seen the leadership has been a spent force. They have done what they can. They didn't succeed. My brother, my sister, step aside. You are not the only person on this earth being given the capacity.
It's interesting that they're able to sack all the CEOs and start again. Yeah. But no president and his ministers can sack all Ghanaians and start again.
You know, I want to give one example. Do you remember how many DCs President Kufuor replaced in his first in 2000? I'm like 80% of them. People told me at the time of the GIPC that we could not change people. I don't believe it.
But you did it.
I actually think it's often explained to people.
Some people hated you for it. Are you aware?
Yeah, I know, but I don't leave any sleepless night as a result of that. Because I believe that it was done in the interest of what it is that people wanted us to do. And today, as I said, those very same people are still in the center. Some of them are still giving me drinks because they got married when they met at the GIPC. So I'm still receiving drinks from them in terms of where they are. But I think it is leadership that propels anything. Whether it's a home, whether it's a business, whether it's a political party, whether it's a country, it is leadership that propels. And if that leadership is weak, the country is weak. Leadership or the entity is weak. So be the home, whatever. If we don't have that leadership, we're in trouble.
And the greatest of all leadership starts with the family, because the family unit is actually what every nation is built on.
My chief financial advisor, Jackie.
Your beautiful wife, your adorable wife,
yes,
who used to provide me with all my glasses.
Yes.
You know.
This year we'll be married 37 years.
Oh, fantastic.
37, yes. This year will be 37 years.
And she looks 37.
I should be very happy to hear that.
No, truly.
She'll be very happy to hear. She just had a birthday a couple of days ago.
Tell me about the children.
I've got two kids, Tamara, who's 31, and Michael, who's going to be 28. Both spent
Michael, my nephew. Michael, my nephew. Michael is a star in England. Big star doing cabaret in England.
He's doing well.
Have you seen any of his performances?
Oh, I've seen almost all of them.
You travel to go see them?
Oh, I do. I don't miss it. I try very hard. It's one of the areas. I have a pet thing. You know, normally sometimes the African man, we always seen as the worst part of the equation in the family, and I never wanted to be known for that particular normally. But my daughter is into see the digital marketing, one of the biggest, I think the top marketing agency in the world. I won't mention the name, but that's what Tamara is doing. Michael started his life as a doctor.
He wanted to do
medicine. He spent 3 years at Leeds, which wasn't easy for us to get into. Then he came, he said he wanted to go into drama, but he did it the right way, just the way Tamara did. He became an Andrew Lloyd Webber scholar. So he got a scholarship, Royal Conservatoire of Scotland in Glasgow. He did that, and now he's living his dream. He's a happy man. Very
he was
proud
Legally Blonde.
Yes, he was.
And he's getting nominations.
He was Emmett. He's won a couple of awards.
Yeah.
He won the awards, and he's doing well. The British have claimed them very quickly, but it's okay.
Who takes more after you? Is it Tamara or Michael?
You know, physically, Tamara looks as a spitting image of Jackie.
Of course.
Just a complete spitting image. Michael looks, well, he doesn't think it looks like me, but when I told him at this age I was that small. But anyway, now he's accepted it. I think they've taken a bit of both of us. Jackie, as you know, is from Sierra Leone. We met in the UK. I call her Ghanaian now, so she should forget the Sierra Leone. She won't be happy with me saying that. But and so I think the most important thing they got from both of us, and I think my political passion. By the way, Jackie is more passionate about Ghanaian politics than you can imagine. You'll be surprised.
I thought her biggest passion in Ghana was Kojo Entry.
Oh, she loves Kojo Entry. 24th night, the only place we must go is Kojo Entry. We cannot go anywhere else but Kojo Entry. She's the biggest fan of Kojo Entry. She loves him. Loves his ballads and so forth. But she loves Ghana. They're doing really well, she and some of her colleagues. Then the Children's House Foundation, as you know, raising money for kids with hole in the heart. They've paid for the 200
for people's surgery
over
to
200
fix their
kids.
hearts. Yeah.
She and her colleagues, 5 or 6 women, very strong ladies, doing their own thing, which is very good to see. The kids have had a very interesting life, and I think that's part of them. They were with us wherever I traveled.
I just love the fact that a Ghanaian father has a son who is studying medicine, and the son says, no, I'm going to leave that, and I'm going to go be one of the mentees of Andrew Lloyd Webber, and I'm going to be an actor, and I'm going to go into cabaret. And you didn't scream about it in the beginning?
I had heart palpitations. But
oh, you did?
Oh, we had I remember that dialogue. We had it in London.
I thought you were cool about it.
Oh, boy, it took me a while. But the one thing that persuaded me, to be honest, is that he hadn't gone about it. He went about it the way I think he knew that would get me to the same place. So just to tell me you can sing, so what? I can play an instrument, so what? He needed to come and say, not only have I got into the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, which is the top 2 conservatoires in the world, that conservatoire gave him a scholarship. He's also a fellow and of the Andrew Lloyd Webber, who was chosen one of 3 or 4 in the country. And he was then going to do 3 years drama, proper training in Shakespearean drama. Not, I'm just going to go to, I know no disrespect to those that do the idols and all the rest of it, this singing business. I don't mind those things. But I needed him to do it on the professional matter. And he did it. And once I sat through there, and I knew Michael had been singing since he was about 6 months old. And even while he was in Ghana, he was doing productions at the National Theatre with GIS, he was there. And so I knew that was, but I had hoped that he would finish.
Stylistically, who does he take his cue from, mom or you?
My grandfather. His grandfather. My father actually had a band. Can you imagine?
Whoa.
They used to make music. He actually had, he used to have, he had bands, and he could dance, and he would be on his back and dancing, my old man. I like to think some of it came from me, but I think Jackie will probably have a disagreement with that when it comes to that. Even though I was in a band at university, I used to sing Prince, believe it or not.
But for those who are really close to you, people generally think you're too serious. Are you aware of that?
Maybe because they look at me at work. I don't play with my work. I work hard and I play hard. That's one I would say.
Rugby?
Love it. Love rugby.
Still?
Oh, I love it. Cricket. I even played American football. People don't realize that.
I want to see you on 2 sides of the team, you and Herbert Mensah.
Yes, it'd be a good game. It'd be a good game. I'm sure Herbert was in the scrum. I was inside and outside center, so it'd be good. Herbert is a big guy. I'm sure he was the second row.
But you're a big guy too.
I played one scrum one time because we were playing a Welsh team whose scrum was about, the scrum half was about the same size as me. I will never forget that. I love sports. In fact, my first 3 interviews, all I talked about was sports. And as I said, before I joined the CDC, it was interesting. I had gone for a first interview. And after the first interview, the gentleman who ended up recruiting me was a great sports fan. He loved cricket. So that weekend, they were going to play cricket at the governor of the central bank, not Carney, his house.
Yeah.
Can you imagine, before I was offered the job, Jackie and I went to spend the night at the governor of the central bank of UK's house to play cricket with his team. Now
that's some networking. That's some networking.
So what is the chance of me not getting a job if that is coming? No, I believe in extracurricular activity. I love sports. I'm a great fan.
Having worked at CDC, having worked at Coca-Cola, having worked as Group Director, Revenue Management, Africa and the Middle East, and then Public Affairs and Communications Vice President, and then having come to Ghana, led the GIPC, and then become Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry. If you were to advise young people who are starting out in a career, what 3 key nuggets would you give them?
I think the first thing I would say is research. You must research whatever it is you have interest in. Understand what are the movers and shakers, what are the key pillars of that, whatever you have an interest in. It doesn't matter whatever it is. The first thing with that. The second thing I would say is then have a plan. You may have to go backwards to go forward in that plan. So I remember, for instance, when I was at NatWest, when I was NatWest Markets, doing very well. I was doing what is called Japanese leveraged leases.
This was before your years in CDC.
This was before CDC. I was earning very well, don't get me wrong. And a group called the Transportation Group, they still exist, by the way, offered me some ridiculous amount of money to come and do aircraft financing, which was a tax-based financing, capital allowances based. Specialized, I love that kind of financing. I think Africa, we can learn a lot from it. And then I got the same offer from CDC, which is about a third of what the TTG offered me. But I took CDC because CDC would get me to where I wanted to go. Now, most people would have probably said, let me take the money, because, boy, I could have done with it. But, so understand that in going where you want to go, you must understand what you want to do. And then the third one I would say is that excel. Do the work. No ifs, buts, maybes. It's not my fault. It's somebody else. No. Do the work. If you'll be made a manager, the definition of managing is to manage problems, not hand problems to somebody else. So when you're doing the work, excel. And when you excel, you will be noticed.
Wow. Fabulous. On this program, we play a video and then we take your reaction to it.
Okay.
Let's take a look at this.
Was that they didn't have the courage to be themselves. And the third top regret was that they didn't have the courage to express their emotions. They pretended to be happy when they were not, and so on. So the question for the rest of us is, do we want to wait till some terminal illness wakes us up? Or should we just confront the fact that in so many ways we're afraid to be authentic because we're so afraid of being rejected?
Too many people are afraid of being authentic because they're afraid of being rejected.
I'll make a confession. And I've made this confession within the party which I'm part of, which is the MPP. And I said sorry to my colleagues, and I said sorry for the following reasons. I said, I kept quiet when I knew things were not working for us, both as a government and as a party. And for that, I'm sorry. Because I should not have kept quiet. I should have made my views known, not going on radio, but made my views known internally. And for that, I apologize to my team and my colleagues, my peers. I think one of the things that hold us back sometimes, he said something about being yourself. I think at 60, one of the things that I've got to realize that I am who I am, both by my heritage, by my experiences, and by my ambitions. And the worst thing I can do is be 80 and say at 60, why did I not do X, Y, and Z? And so the truth of the matter is, yes, most times it is better, or it is easier, let me say, not better, it is easier to keep quiet in the face of issues than to express yourself. But that's something you should not do. Because you may think that by keeping quiet, somehow you are helping. But the reality is you're actually elongating and making the situation worse. So I would encourage people, be yourself, live your dreams, and never say no for an answer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robert Ahomka-Lindsay.
Pleasure.
My former boss, former CEO of GIPC, former Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry. Be yourself. Speak the truth. Speak your mind. I'm glad I spoke my mind when the time came up. And I'm just happy with his authenticity. Thank you very much, Mr.
Pleasure to be here.
We'll see you next time on Master of the Game when we come back. But remember this. They say it's lonely at the top. Don't listen to those who say that. Because if you're not nice to people, the top will definitely be lonely. But if you're kind, if you're honest, if you're graceful and you're grateful, you will always be in good company. See you at the top. The bottom is too crowded.
2024 has been an amazing year, but I believe 2025 is going to be much better. We at High